In summary, this was his reasoning. This was what the book was all about. Let's see what was believed in the church at the time. 1891. This is from Uriah Smith. He says, the Holy Spirit is the Spirit of God. It is also the Spirit of Christ. Here's another one from Wagner. Here we find that the Holy Spirit is both the Spirit of God and the Spirit of Christ. From Loughborough. We learn from this language that when we speak of the Spirit of God, we are really speaking of His presence and power. John Loughborough, Vian Herald, September 13, 1898. Does that sound to you like these brethren believed that the Holy Spirit was a person called God, the Holy Spirit? No, they believed it was the Spirit of God, it was the Spirit of Christ. Loughborough is very clear down there at the bottom. Is the presence and power of God, at the very bottom there, is the presence and power of God a different person to God? Certainly not. Now this is a very clear definition that Loughborough is saying. It says when we speak of the Spirit, it's really the presence and power of God. Where do you think Loughborough would have got this definition from? Do you think perhaps that he would have read the Spirit of Prophecy in his days? And maybe come across a statement in Stars of the Times, November 23, which says, the divine Spirit that the world's Redeemer promised to send is the presence and power of God. Does that sound like a different person to you? So this here is the foundation that the church believed at the time. Kellogg was departing from that and he was saying, listen, the Holy Spirit is a person. It's God, the Holy Spirit. Now I said, be careful. So, in order to compare between what Kellogg was believing and the foundation at the time, when God gives us His Spirit, does God give us another individual or Himself? Kellogg would teach what? Now an individual would be called what? God, the Holy Spirit. So when God gives us His Spirit, it's really God, the Holy Spirit, a different person. But the foundation on the faith at the time said that the Spirit is really the Spirit of God and of Christ. It is the presence and power of God. Now let's see what the answer is. Is it someone different or not? Testimonies, Volume 7, page 273. In giving us His Spirit, God gives us Himself, making Himself a fountain of divine influences to give health and life to the world. So it's very plain. When we put history side by side, it doesn't really need that much comment. Kellogg was departing from that teaching and he was separating actually between God and His Spirit, making the Spirit of God into another different person, making it God, the Holy Spirit. And he tried to use the Spirit of prophecy in support. Let's see what else does the servant of the Lord say about the Spirit. Because if she was to rebuke Kellogg, then she must clearly define in the writings what she believed. And she does. You know, that statement that says third person of the Godhead that people still use today, does she explain to us what this third person of the Godhead is? Does she explain more about the Holy Spirit? And she does. Here's an example. Review and Herald, April 5, 1906. She says, it is the Spirit that quickeneth, the flesh profiteth nothing. The words that I speak unto you, they are spirit and they are life. She's quoting John 6 here. Christ is not here referring to His doctrine, but to His person, the divinity of His character. Very, very enlightening statement. So when Jesus was speaking about the Spirit, He says the Spirit, it's the Spirit that quickeneth. Sister White says when Jesus said that, He was not referring to His doctrine, but He's actually referring to His person. Now people would have you believe today that Jesus was referring to another person. See what the difference is? The Holy Spirit is a person. Sister White said it's the third person of the Godhead. It is the person of who? It's the person of Christ. This is what it is. Kellogg was teaching the Holy Spirit is a third person different to the Father and the Son. It's very subtle because he almost used the same words to describe two different beliefs. And this is why Sister White said this is a deadly heresy. So when Sister White is talking about the personhood of the Holy Spirit, she says here, this refers to the person of Christ. It's actually the divinity of His character. That's a very plain statement. But we won't take just one. Let's have a look at another one. In the Southern Work, September 13, 1898. That Christ should manifest Himself to them and yet be invisible to the world was a mystery to the disciples. Here she's commenting about John 14, where Jesus speaking about the Comforter that will come. So this was a mystery to the disciples. They didn't understand it clearly. They could not understand the words of Christ in their spiritual sense. They were thinking of the outward visible manifestation. They could not take in the fact that they could have the presence of Christ with them, and yet he be unseen by the world. They did not understand the meaning of a spiritual manifestation. So who were they going to have with them? The presence of Christ. We read earlier that the Spirit is the personal presence of God, and it's also the presence of Christ. It's the very person of Christ. So this is what Christ meant when he told his disciples he will send them another comforter. He's talking about his own Spirit, his own person that will come to them, invisible. And this is what Sister White calls the third person of the God. It's the divinity of his character. So Kellogg misunderstood that statement and tried to use it to promote a certain teaching that today is more common than it was back then in our church. Let's continue. Here's another one, Desire of Ages, page 166. While Jesus ministers in the sanctuary above, he is still, by his Spirit, the minister of the church on earth. He is withdrawn from the eye of sense, but his parting promise is fulfilled. Lo, I am with you always, even unto the end of the world. Now, according to this statement, this is a very interesting statement.